right, friends.
It's been a day.
It's episode 69 because you guys were 68 on the last episode. You and Kinsey, I got a lot of great feedback on that episode, man. It was really good.
Well, it's probably because Fish jumped in at that front end and, just Fish brought the heat.
Oh, man. Yep. And today we are only going to be on one camera, so you have that blessing of only seeing our faces on one camera rather than close-ups because we're having technical difficulties, but we have the one camera. It's Monday, it is.
All day, I think.
It is all day, hopefully that's as far as we know. But yeah, man, we had a great event on the 23rd of March, the coffee tasting event again.
We did do those. I had a lot of fun.
It was great. It was a great time. We opened that up to 50 people, and 50 people signed up and came.
We were, it was good. Shout out to Skylar Koblenz,
yes.
Ben Pant, Chad Bennett. Lily Brown was
Brandon Kinsey.
Kinsey brought his French press out. You were pulling shots of espresso.
Shots.
So all our peeps that were involved on kind of the making that happen. I just stood there and looked pretty. That was kind of my.
You do good at that, Josh. This is what Nicole tells us.
That's right. But no, it was good.
It was.
I had conversations with people that I've never really had a face to face with. So it was really cool. Just pretty low key.
Yeah.
Just hopefully people made some connections with others.
Yep.
And
I happened to get in conversation with a couple people maybe 15 minutes after the event was done, and they were talking a million miles an hour. It was amazing. I was like, wow.
That's right.
Caffeine, people spinning their wheels.
Yeah, which
was awesome.
Great. We did small servings.
We did.
But
I had some protein before I came because I was thinking I was going to be drinking a lot of coffee, but I was making shots so there was a line out of the church kitchen because that was the only plug, the recept that would work for my espresso machine. And I was trying to pull shots as fast as I could. So I didn't even taste any until the event was over.
I didn't have a single drop of coffee at the event.
Really?
Honestly, by the time
I had a shot afterwards.
By the time I got around to it, I was like, oh, theirs is all gone. Oh, theirs is all gone.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So I didn't.
I think that means we were doing a good job hosting.
I think so too. So I got home and I'm like, oh, hey, Nicole, if I make some coffee, do you want some? Because I didn't have any. So
she was probably like, what?
No, she was down. So did a little pour over at home and it was good. But no, thanks for everyone who came out for that. That was, we had fun. I hope you had fun. Again, maybe that's something we were just talking before we pushed record.
A couple times a year.
Maybe we do that. Yeah, do that 2-3 times a year.
Yeah.
Just as a connection point.
Yep. So. And another big thing, you mentioned it in episode 68. We'll mention it again. We are so grateful, so thankful for all the people who have subscribed. The now over 1,000 subscribers to the church YouTube channel consists of the Bible teaching from our teaching pastors and then Radiant Reflections. Thank you. That was a huge goal of ours. And we do have a really cool event. Josh, I was sitting in the terminal, the United Terminal in Denver.
Sounds fancy.
When I called for information
regarding this thing.
Regarding the event idea that you and I have, and I had a great conversation with the person on the other side of the phone. See, I'm being ambiguous on purpose.
I know, and I like that.
I knew you would.
I like that.
And so I'm waiting to hear back from them. Perhaps episode 70, we will have the big announcement for what our celebratory event will be.
And you know what I was thinking we could do just as a fun bonus?
Yeah.
Is we pick some of particularly your favorite beans from your favorite roasters.
Okay.
And maybe this is because I honestly don't even know how many this would be. But we pick 6 people and they each get 1,000 coffee beans. From that particular, I mean,
that's fun.
I'll pay one of my kids or something to count out 1,000 coffee because I'm probably not going to do that personally, but
that would be fun.
But just tie it in. But yeah, so we're putting that together and look forward to that. But again, you guys have been awesome. Thanks for just the way that you guys have made that happen. Because we didn't. I mean, that isn't us going in and setting up fake email accounts and just subscribing, right? That's you guys. So
it's you. Yeah. We're thankful for everybody who shares the episodes, who likes the episodes, who have followed us on Spotify, who have liked and reviewed us on Apple Music or the podcast app.
Apple Podcast.
Yeah. So.
No, it's good.
Josh, what app do you use for podcasts?
I do Apple Podcasts.
You do Apple Podcasts. Yep. Okay. I use Overcast, and I really prefer it. I like it. My wife uses Apple Podcasts. She likes that one too. But yeah, episode 69. Josh, you were the teaching pastor yesterday, and you were talking about 3 different components of emotional health. So emotional health in marriage, singleness, and dating, which I thought, as you said at the beginning of the episode or the beginning of the teaching, is like, I think we could do a couple teachings on each of the, you could go 6 weeks in a series.
Yes.
Because it obviously hits every single constituency of people.
Yeah.
But
and there's a lot of ways that you could unpack holiness, in marriage, for example. There are a lot of ways. I mean, it'd be phenomenal to be able to do a couple of teachings on singleness and bring in like a Sam Alberry or or somebody else, or somebody else who, because again, the challenge is, we can bring biblical principles, but it's, to have somebody who's living in that situation. We've talked about that before. It's like somebody who's 22 years old and single trying to teach you how to have a healthy marriage.
Appreciate you, bruh.
Nothing against 22-year-olds, but nothing against people that are single. But I mean, it's more challenging to speak into a life circumstance that you are not.
Experience is the best teacher, But I will say, we have to pause, Josh. I started talking into episode 69, and you're great teaching. We didn't even banter about the coffee we're drinking.
Oh, dude, we're
good grief.
Oh, did we start a timer?
Well, I could see on the camera.
Okay, because we've got that limited space.
We do have limited space. We're disciplining ourselves. So this coffee, all I know, it is from Heart in Portland, one of the best shops in the country. I know that it's inside this envelope.
This is like an award show right here. It's like the Golden Mugs.
What I know about this
awards or something.
Yes. This was left over from the coffee tasting event.
Okay.
So I thought I wasn't going to have enough coffee, and I actually had way too much coffee.
Okay.
So I learned how much that we need.
Well, you
those little cups
some
are
of that in the vacuum thing for worship team.
I done vacuumed it all.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and one of them is arriving today. It's going to get vacuumed.
Okay.
Oh yeah, vacuum sealed and put in the freezer. So this is called. I know this is from Heart, and this is the story. This is actually a blend. It's not a single origin. So I'm excited to pull some espresso shots from this. But what are you tasting, Josh?
So I'm going to go with dark chocolate, lavender, and at this point I've already finished the cup, so I'm going to try to. But I know initially my first guess was dark chocolate.
Okay.
I'm going to say lavender.
Okay.
And there's a third. I just can't place it. When I was smelling it,
I definitely smell chocolate.
Like there's a third note. I can't place it. So I'm gonna officially submit dark chocolate and lavender.
I'm gonna say apricots, green grapes, and chocolate. I'm piggybacking on chocolate. So this is the stereo blend. This is a 50% Ethiopia from the Riripa region. I've never heard of that. 50% from Honduras, from the Los Andes region of Honduras. Cola, like soda, like a Pepsi or a Coke. Cola bergamot.
Okay, what is that even? What did I just see that in? Because that's in like a lot of teas.
Bergamot was in like one of the espressos.
Grey. So like Earl Grey tea, it's like they typically talk about the bergamot. But I don't know what bergamot is.
Do you have any more of that left?
I don't. Dude. It's like,
Josh, think about this. Now that you've had it in your mouth, I taste it. Clover flower.
Okay, well,
it tastes like clove. You remember well, you maybe not. Clove cigarettes?
I mean, I never smoked a club cigarette.
What were those called? They were in a blue box, and it started with a J. Every once in a while, long time ago, we would get a box of those. Clover flower. I taste the clover, but yes, this is called the Stereo Blend from Heart Coffee in Portland. If you listen to Bishop Comer, John Mark Comer talks often about Heart Coffee because it's one of his favorite shops there in the city, which he's not there anymore. He's in Los Angeles.
Okay, I have a botany question.
Oh, okay.
Because you said clover. Does clove or cloves, whatever? Because that's like a spicy. This is from clover?
No, so clover is actually like a grass,
what
like
was
in a field. Yeah. Clove.
But what was the note?
The clove flower, which to me would be the spice.
Okay.
And I taste that spice. It has a nutmeggy star and anise sort of.
Yeah, you see those blended.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Okay. There you go. We circled back to the coffee.
We did.
For those of you that were worried. And we're like, wait.
And Josh, you did say at the front of your teaching that we spend 20 minutes. I felt that was a gross exaggeration, Josh.
It was.
We're about 5, maybe 10 minutes on coffee. Now, great coffee. This is pretty good. I think it'll be better as an espresso. Okay. I really do. So I'm excited.
You don't do a lot of blends.
No. We do a lot of single origins. But most times when you go to a third wave shop, you'll have 2 options for espresso. You will have the house blend, which is very, very common. Most espresso is a blend. And then you have the option to get a single origin shot, which is usually like $1 more when you're, when you're getting shots from
I wonder what the science is. We could probably ask Paul or something. Like
Paul would know.
What is the science behind blends? Like, what's the intention? Are you like, hey, we've got extra of this and extra of this. Let's just throw that together.
No.
Or, I mean, there's like, nope, hey, we want to combine this.
It's the character and the person. Yeah, the notes from each of those types of coffee combined together make something wonderful. Like peanut butter and jelly.
Because I think of like growing up, right? And it's like, oh, we've got a little bit of this left over, a little bit of this left over. And what you call it like, well, no, so we've got like hodgepodge or something like that. Or like
our Amish neighbors, haystack. Haystack dinners.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So just throw whatever's left into a pan and
call it good.
That's dinner. So I don't know if that's the way that it worked with coffee blends.
No, it's very calculating. And I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if Paul saw that we were doing this event, because it would have been kind of cool to have Paul there, because Paul like does cuppings. Like him and Skylar. I mean, Skylar has done cuppings as well. I've never done a cupping before, but like Paul he owns like 15 shops or something. He's a professional in the industry. So it would be cool. Maybe sometime we have Paul and Jared on the podcast.
There we go.
They're both brothers in Christ. And Paul goes to our church.
We bring them to the next coffee event, and they could like educate us.
They could too.
So
and their roaster, his name's Jansen. He's a brother as well. So pretty cool. I know they've got a lot of people of faith that work with and for them. So yeah, it's good company. Good people. Some of the best people I know.
Yeah, they're cool.
They're great people. Them. Yep. All right. Episode 69. We're back to where we were. Talking about marriage, singleness, and dating. And Josh, you started in Ephesians chapter 5. You started in 1 Peter chapter 1 and John chapter 13. Just kind of lay the bedrock for those 3, we'll say, scriptural anchors.
So the 1 Peter one is a little bit of a throwback to how we started this series, and it's kind of establishing, in a sense, the why behind holiness. Yeah. I mean, like the call, and this echoes back to the Older Testament, right? Peter is quoting the Older Testament, where God is telling his people, hey, I am holy, and because I am holy, I'm calling you to be holy as well.
You need to be holy.
Right? And now this is echoed in the New Covenant, right? Peter said, hey, this wasn't just a then thing. This is now. This is current. He's still holy, and as his covenant people, we are called to be holy. So he sets a standard, and he's the standard,
right?
I mean, and that's connected to the gospel, right? Like God has the standard, we can't meet it, but Jesus does, and in Jesus we we come into that place of relationship with God, and then Holy Spirit works in us to sanctify and make holy that which is just the residual sin, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And not even residual, because you know what, there are days where I'm like, it's not residue. It's the whole,
the main constitution,
the whole thing, man. But so that's where that First Peter passage, Ephesians 5. That's
bedrock.
That's one of the kind of the primary passages I would say you can see where we have specific instruction.
Maybe read. Should we read that?
Yeah, dude. Okay, good.
You've got that's a CSB right there.
Yeah, that's all right.
I've got a message over there as well, if you prefer.
I mean, I don't usually, but I'm curious what it says.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
The hard thing about the message is there's no verses.
Yeah, you just got to
finding
guess.
where you're at is kind of a thing.
Let's see what Eugene Peterson says.
God bless Eugene Peterson
in the message.
I wonder if the saints that have been, gone before us, like, are they, we've asked this question before, are they conscious of us right now on earth? Like, do they know just how much their work and service to the world before they passed, how much they affected us? And Eugene's definitely one of those people.
Hey, I like this one actually.
Let's
in
hear
your
it.
margins. It gives you the verse range.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. So this is a paraphrase. Again, this isn't a translation of Scripture.
Right.
It's a paraphrase.
Right.
But we can still learn from those things. It says this, and this starts in verse 21. Out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent to one another. Wives, understand and support your husbands in ways that show your support for Christ. The husband provides leadership to his wife the way Christ does to his church, not by domineering, but by cherishing. I like that. So just as the church submits to Christ as he exercises such leadership, wives should likewise submit to their husbands. Husbands, go all out in your love for your wives, exactly as Christ did for the church. A love marked by giving, not getting. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke her beauty. I like this. This is
the message is beautiful.
I was always a little bit standoffish towards the message.
Sure, me too.
But
until you read it,
I'm digging this, bro. Everything he does and says is designed to bring the best out of her, dressing her in dazzling white silk, radiant with holiness. Wow. And that is how husbands ought to love their wives. They're really doing themselves a favor since they're already one in marriage. No one abuses its own body, does he? No, he feeds and pampers it. That's how Christ treats us, the church, since we are part of his body. And this is why a man leaves his father and mother and cherishes his wife. No longer two, they become one flesh. This is a huge mystery, and I don't pretend to understand it all. What is clearest to me is the way Christ treats the church. And this provides a good picture of how each husband is to treat his wife, loving himself in loving her, and how each wife is to honor her husband. I like that.
Beautiful. Well, I will say, too, just on another note about the message, I think it is the most beautiful rendition, we'll call it, of Romans 7. When you read that battle that Paul goes through when writing to the church in Rome about, I don't do the things I want to do, I do the things that I don't want to do. That, depending, especially in King James, that could be like, whoa,
wait, what?
Whoa,
what is he actually doing?
What's going on here?
I don't know anymore.
But I feel like Eugene's rendering of that text is the most meaningful. It brought that text alive to me in such a cool way. So I keep the message around CSB. I came up on New King James. Well, actually, I came up on NIV as a child.
You see, I grew up with NIV.
NIV, but then through Bible college and then the church where I was on staff before was a New King James church. So CSB's been, I love CSB.
No, I grew up NIV as a young adult-ish. I gravitated towards the New Living Translation, which I utilized for one of the passages yesterday. I like the readability.
Yes.
And then we use CSB as kind of our standard issue at Radiant Life.
It has become.
That's kind of what we use. I mean, tons of scholarship that's gone into that.
Yes.
Cross-denominational. So it's not like, the danger with some of these Bibles, is basically this one camp put this out. Well, you've got a little bit more chance for bias versus with the CSB, you've got scholarship from all sorts of denominations weighing in on this. I just think it's a very robust translation.
And even in the message there, when you were reading Ephesians 5, it was obvious in that reading that Eugene Peterson is coming from an egalitarian camp. The way that he phrased certain things, which is fine, is good. An NIV, there are some real problems in the NIV translation.
Well, which one? Because some people would say you got to go back to the 1984 to be a little bit versus like the 2011.
Yeah.
Or,
Yep. No, I think that's regardless. I feel like I've told people often, look, just read the Bible, whatever it is, just be reading it. Just be reading reading the scriptures.
Well, and there's beauty in reading multiple translations. There are tools like blueletterbible.org where you can like go to a verse and you can just click on Bibles and whoosh, you'll see 20 different translations.
Yes.
So you can kind of see, hey, like what is this? How did they translate this particular phrase or word? And so
do you have a go-to commentary, like a person that you like, Matthew Henry or something along those? Like, do you have a specific...
not an individual? I really like the Moody commentary.
Okay.
It's very succinct, right? Like it's not like they're going to give you, hey, here's a couple of sentences on this. So that I do really like the Tony Evans commentary. I've been using that one. I know like Chris Kidd, like he'll reference, and I think Kinsey has referenced in some of his message, David Guzik.
Yeah, he's a friend.
David Guzik has he's written some pretty good commentaries. Those are out there.
Enduring Word as through the whole Bible. Yeah. Yeah, David's a great guy. He's Calvary Chapel pastor in Santa Barbara.
But if I could only have two, I mean, out of my current selections, I'd probably go to either that Moody one or the Tony Evans.
Yeah.
And then I've got some, I use Logos.
Yeah.
And that just had like, you've got ape loads through those. I don't even necessarily like know which comment is like, oh, hey, I want to look this passage up. And it just gives you, hey, here's a whole bunch of different
It's
entries.
Bananas.
Yeah.
Very academic.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Kinsey's definitely like the wizard with that. He'll be like, oh, click this and that. And then like magic happens.
Yes. I have it. I bought like their baseline thing way back, and the learning curve was too steep for me, and it became more of it was inhibiting, versus I also have an app on my phone called eBible, and what's cool about eBible is that one of the versions of the scripture has the Strong's Concordance baked in, which takes you back to original language.
That's what I love about blueletterbible.org is they have Strong's, they have the oh my goodness, the other lexicon that they pull. So they have a couple of them to where you can say, oh, hey, what are these Thayers? Maybe it's Thayers, right? But to where you've got these, original language resources that you
super
can
helpful,
utilize, and you click right through there. So and it's free. Right? I mean, Logos, like
it is not free,
Logos
man.
is not free.
No. The guys at Blue Letter Bible are often at the conferences that I'm at, and they'll have a table set up, and they're just great guys, love Jesus, and just want to see material put into people's hands to study the Bible healthy ways. So, I don't know how we got sideways. Oh, because we read from the message.
Yes.
And talking about being holy out of 1 Peter, Ephesians 5, and then John 13, 1 through 17. But ultimately, Josh, what you were saying that I took away was that in all three of these categories, marriage, singleness, and dating, Jesus is the standard. And what's interesting is Jesus was single. Jesus was a single man. He never married, obviously. So I think there's a lot we can learn there. But you also framed this. You're going to like how I did that. You framed this conversation with three portraits, right?
I like how you did that.
A little alliteration there. And I really liked that because you had these pictures on screen. You had a picture of a beautiful couple, that were married, and then this single guy, and then what was the last image?
It was like they're probably teenage young adult.
Just talking.
Like
dating.
Walking together.
Yeah,
got their
that's
coffee.
Right. That's right.
Got their,
Right. So clearly not married, but but more than friends. Yeah. So the three portraits in marriage, and the one thing that I think right out of the front, and I'd love to hear you talk more about this, because I think the church has failed here. You said, that marriage and dating, neither is a higher calling, neither is a holier calling. Talk more about that, Josh.
Well, again, it's just one of the ways that you see church. And I actually, in kind of prepping for this message, there are some organizations, I won't say which, but pretty heavy hitters in the Christian, particularly the conservative Christian community, that still have material out there that's basically, marriage, that's normal.
The apex.
That's kind of what,
right.
To be single is the exception. And I'm like, and so they still have material out there that kind of promotes this idea that basically we should all be moving towards marriage.
Right.
And it's like,
where do you think that comes from?
You know what?
I have an idea, but I'm curious.
I don't know that I thought through that. Because like you said, biblically speaking, Jesus was single.
Right.
Paul was single. Although I've heard some people make an argument that at one time he may have been married.
I think he was.
For him to be able to get to the level of status he had within the Jewish religious community.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my buddy Lance, and he referenced some guy who it was debated, was he a rabbi? Because he never married. And if you didn't marry, you couldn't be a rabbi. Now, Paul never claims that he was a rabbi.
Right.
But he studied under heavy hitter rabbis like Gamaliel and whatever.
Yeah.
So I've heard
the tribe of Benjamin.
People make a case that he may have been married at one point. But when he pens his letter to the Corinthian church, he's single. So if he was married, we don't know what happened.
Right.
Did she die? Did they divorce? We don't know.
Right.
We don't know. Totally lost my train of thought. So singleness is not looked down on in Scripture. And
there's instruction.
It's actually held up as this could be a good thing. Jesus, when he's talking about, oh my goodness, I'm totally drawing a blank. I debated whether or not I included this in the message because Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples, and the topic of marriage comes up, and Jesus talks about eunuchs. Some people are made that way, some people choose to be that way. I mean, and it's and he talks about marriage a little bit, and and he says, "Hey, this is a hard teaching." And his disciples are like, "Yeah, man, it is." What's up? But I mean, even in that conversation, it isn't saying, "Oh, well, it's better to be single," or "It's better to be married." It's saying, "Hey, whatever situation God has called you to or has you in right now, lean into that." Yeah. But what is your idea about how we've in a sense elevated the status of marriage over singleness in the church?
I think that it's elevated, and I'm going to say maybe for good reasons. So the two reasons that I would see that the reason that marriage is elevated, maybe not to a healthy level, but should be in some ways, is because singleness and dating are not images of eternal realities. They're not parallels. And we know that marriage, the husband and wife on earth, this is the number one symbolic picture that we have in our existence for marriage. Secondly, in the single world and in the dating world, it shouldn't be, but there is a command for multiplication. There is a command for procreation. So the holiness and sanctity of a covenant of marriage within those bounds, between a man and a woman, there is a kingdom expansion. The command, I think, from God to multiply is a good command, and it's for the furthering of the kingdom of God.
Yeah,
so
but you
raise children.
You have to be careful with that though too, because you have people even that are in a marriage context, and
for whatever
reason. Like, I mean, there are a variety of reasons why people struggle with infertility or choose, hey, like this.
But that's not a disobedience to God, though.
No,
that's just that's a physiology.
Like it can be a slippery slope of because in the same way, sometimes we elevate marriage over singleness.
Yeah.
You elevate, you're married with kids. Oh, that's
exactly,
quote unquote better than. And it's like, no, we got to be careful with this.
Right.
Because, I mean, it creates these weird tiers of. Yeah. I mean, and you're not, because you could be married and your relationship with Jesus could be total crap.
Right.
I mean, and just because you're married doesn't mean you're healthier spiritually or that you're more advanced spiritually. Right.
But it does mean that you are in a covenant relationship that is biblically symbolized with the church and the head.
But that's where I love that.
Whether it's good or bad,
Sam Albury quote, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, yes, you get this, he uses that word shape, right? Like marriage shows us the shape of the gospel. Singleness shows us the sufficiency of the gospel.
Oh, such a good quote.
Oh, well, that whole I haven't read anything from him that isn't awesome.
Yeah.
So
he's a scholar.
Yeah, he's a smart dude.
Yeah.
Smart dude. I think.
Well, jumping into just what the holiness in marriage looks like out of Ephesians chapter 5, there were three takeaways. And I just kind of put these slashes as you were reading through Ephesians 5. So Ephesians 5 talks about wives submitting, husbands loving, wives respecting, husbands loving. It's like a double command from husbands to love. Talk more about that, Josh. Talk more. What does it mean for wives to submit and respect? What does that actually mean?
I like the way that Peterson kind of puts it, because what he uses, that like support type language, and that's interesting. So when we did the vow renewal, that was kind of how, Nicole and I we did the scripture reflection on that, and we talked out of Ephesians 5, and she talked about that. Hey, one aspect of this submission is supporting, right? Like, hey, in whatever area like your husband is called to, how do you support? She talked about watering instead of weeding being kind of this hey, I'm going to help you identify all the things that you're doing wrong.
Tearing out.
And take out these weeds versus no. She says watering is like, how do I foster growth in
encourage Christ in you.
Encourage Christ in the husband.
Wow.
Right? It's where you're part of that, in a sense, that greenhouse that helps him grow. Yeah. And these things play, they're hand in hand, because like for us, right, as husbands, if I am fulfilling my end of the mandate, and I'm loving Nicole as Christ loved the church, which is this sacrificial love that is fueled by what is truly best for Nicole, well, that's easy to submit to and support.
Right.
It's
right.
I like how Peter says this isn't a domineering thing.
No.
It isn't a I'm the boss. Like, I get 2 votes to your 1.
Yeah.
So I mean,
which is where we have seen a lot in the purity culture, and also just hyper conservative Christian culture, that domineering has been portrayed, and it has been taught from pulpits, and it has been. I know I saw examples in my life, pastors around me, they personified that sort of the wife is just a rug that you walk on. There wasn't a mutuality in that relationship. There was a clear power differentiation it was unhealthy.
Which is a crazy throwback to, I actually think, culture that Paul and Jesus both went against.
Yeah.
Right? Because
that was very cultural.
Culturally, right? Like a woman, like you maybe get half a vote. Yeah. The testimony of a man is going to count. You as one dude, you can count. Yeah, but you need like 2 or 3 women to equal the same, authority. And you see Paul and Jesus, elevate the status of women. Even, you go to the 1 Corinthians 7. I know I'm jumping ahead just a fuzz, right? But you go to the 1 Corinthians 7 conversation Paul has about sex, right? Within the context of marriage.
Right.
And the fact that Paul gives women equal standing, right, in a culture where sexual satisfaction was a man's prerogative.
Right.
Like in this culture, like, hey, man wants it, man gets it. Like that's their culture.
Yep.
And he's saying, nope.
Yeah.
No. The wife has equal access, equal determination here. Like she has as much a voice in this conversation as the husband does. Like that would have thrown some of their culture right on its head. So yeah, when we take these things and we use them to domineer, we have grossly misused, and we're actually cutting right against what Paul is trying to do. I don't know. It's frustrating.
I think in the purest sense of the word, and hear me, listeners and viewers, Christianity was the first feminist movement. It really was. In the purest sense of the word, maybe not modern progressive liberal feminism, but in the sense of actually liberating females from oppressive cultural standards, Christianity was first. Was first to kind of blaze a trail to make a difference in equality in those areas. You also talked about the mystery. So one of the holy aspects of marriage is this mystery of oneness. Of course, we know the actual physicality that the scriptures are referring to, but if you can, Josh, talk more about what you think about this mystery of oneness. Why do you think that word mystery is used? It's mysterion. What?
Because we have no freaking idea.
We get it. We see it. Yeah.
Well, but it also highlights, like things when we talk about sex, right? It is far more than just a physical act.
Right.
Like there is a spiritual reality that happens in sex.
Right.
Right. That there is this bonding that happens.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and that's where, again, not to just make it all Andy Stanley quotes, although I really appreciate the teachings of Andy Stanley, right? Like, he talks about one of the things that is problematic with whether it's serial sexual experiences or even kind of in the context of divorce, like you can't unone what God has made one. I can't remember. He
without a tearing
uses that. Yeah, I mean that's like a So yeah, there's a spiritual reality to sex that we often ignore, right? And we refer to sex in these terms. Oh, this is just like animal instinct. No, it isn't. Right. I mean, we have a sex drive, and God created that in us, right? But that's not just a physical thing that happens. It's much more than that.
There's more to it.
Yes.
Yeah. The kingdom portrait, Josh, that you laid out for marriage is that mystery of the relationship between Christ and the church. So talk about those symbols there between husband and wife and where that relationship overlaps. How did you?
Well, I just think the cool thing with scripture is there's so much symbolism, right? All woven throughout. But I love it because it's like God is giving us kind of this softball to things that we wouldn't otherwise understand. He's like, you know what? I'm going to give you a picture. I mean, and this is the way that Jesus taught, right? Like he uses imagery. It's like Pastor Brandon, right? With his word pictures. Yeah. Like, it's just like, you know what? I'm going to give you a visual that helps kind of cement this in your understanding.
Yeah. I understand it more clearly.
And so he says, all right, the relationship between Christ and the church, which, okay, how do we figure that out, right? This one person, right? He came physically, right? This one being, whatever. Like, how do we demonstrate his love post death, resurrection, ascension? How do we actually see what that looks like for the rest of time? And he says, marriage. Like that's that picture. When marriage is done well, Like this, when we live into those things that we're called to in Ephesians 5, you know, this mutual submission, this agape love, you know, from the husband to the wife, you know, all these different pieces. When we do that, we paint a portrait for the world to see of what that actually looks like. Because we can say, oh yeah, like Jesus loves me, like he died for me, like, and there's spiritual recognition of the gospel in that. But to actually sit here and see, oh man, that's what it looks like.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the Sam Alberry quote or whether you said it, but one of you in the message said a gospel picture. You know, that it is a gospel picture, which I think is amazing. You know, when you think about the church being that bride and the husband being that bridegroom, Christ being our bridegroom, we collectively as his followers are the bride. I mean, there's all this imagery. We talk about the garments, the white garments. There's all this symbolism towards even marriage. And we know in the end that there's a marriage supper. Yep. So like a reception, like
a feast. Yeah.
Like you know, we all would have dinner after a wedding. It's pretty. There's a lot of that in the scriptures. The mutual submission part, Josh, you talked about serving and submitting, and you referenced Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4. And I think that was a much more rounded way of looking at submission, because I think that not only within the church, but then also in culture, we do have some ground to cover and make up, because that mutual submission hasn't really been what's been taught for the most part. It has been a subservient kind of representation.
Well, in the Philippians 2, you could apply that to any other three relationships.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so that cuts across all three. Right? Like, what if I go into these things as, you know, whether it's in a marriage, in a dating relationship, in just in friendship, and in biblical community, right? Like, what does it look like for me to take a posture of humility and truly consider others as better than myself? Not, and this is, humility gets messy when we think that humility means demeaning myself. Right? This was actually this was something for a long time. I thought, you know, oh, humility, like you can't accept compliments.
Right.
Somebody say, oh, hey, you sound really good on bass today.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Let me point out all the ways that I, you know, screwed up today. Like I need to be humble. It's like, that's not humility. That's pride in disguise. Like that's really what that is. But I mean, I actually think in those moments, the humble thing is to thank you. Like I validate your opinion, your perception.
And you chose to cooperate with the work of God in your life through the gifts that he's given you. He didn't you're not an automaton. Like he didn't just, make you play bass that way. I mean, he enabled you and empowered you that Sunday to do so, but you had a choice. You participated in the work of God. And so there is agency there that we can accept. Coming out of that mutual submission, we'll full circle back to that holistic view of sex out of 1 Corinthians 7. And it was interesting, Josh, you talked about predominantly, this isn't always the truth, but predominantly men view sex in just a very physical way, and where women view it in a more emotional way. And again, you did this well all morning. You're like, hey, these are generalizations. They may not be true of you. They may not be true of our listeners and viewers for every single person. But overall, these are pretty accurate ways to look at things. Talk more about that. Why do you where does that come from? Is that genetic? Is it temperament? Is it gender? I mean, it's obviously gender.
Yeah, I think in general, it's probably just a gender difference. I mean, again, these are generalizations, but it's, and again, if this is not representative of you, I remember being in a communications class in college, and they talked about masculine versus feminine communication styles, and I'm like going through these lists, and I'm like, oh wow, like I check like almost every box for a feminine communication style. I'm like, what does that mean? I mean, not that I'm not like, oh, am I like not like
No.
what you see play out now.
No.
But it's like, oh, interesting. So yeah, there are obviously exceptions.
Yeah.
To the rule. Where was I going with that, JB?
Well, maybe I was thinking in a holistic view of sex, if those are the generalizations, and if you, listener, viewer, fall into one of those categories, depending on your gender, maybe a healthy way to fulfill Philippians 2 is to consider the other side. And you kind of talked about that, guys, hey, the old saying, sex starts in the kitchen, if men would think those ways, maybe there is a mutual submission to one another where a man begins to think more about the emotional components of intimacy. And perhaps for females, think more about the physical component. I don't know. I don't even know if that,
and that's
looks
the
like,
thing.
but
That's the problem with generalities, right? Because it's not like
it breaks down.
The kind of the unfair stereotype is that men, hey, they're just basically, for lack of a better way to say it, right? Dudes are always just horny, like they're ready to go. Like, right. Women have sex drives too, right? So, even in that, I think we've done a disservice, because it's not that women don't want to have sex or don't enjoy sex, right? But there are different layers to it. At times, again, depending on, take this on a case-by-case basis. But it's like, I remember, I don't know who the author is, but they talk about how, what men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. Like so many things. And the way that they're trying to use spaghetti is that like so many different things are connected.
Right.
Versus like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go home. Like it's time for sex. Like that's all I'm focused on. Like the rest of my day has nothing to do with sex. Versus, I mean, for a woman, if this spaghetti, analogy is accurate, like, well, no, like, hey, you know what? I had a coworker that treated me really poorly today. Yeah. And that's going to have a significant effect on what happens in the bedroom. Yeah. So men, if we don't make ourselves available to step into the emotional aspects, we're not serving our wives well. Yeah. So, and I think further, the rewards of godly mutual submission in all places in marriage are really huge. I could know that I could speak for Josh on this, and we'll be a little bit past PG right now. There's a big difference between intimacy that is obligatory or just like, this is what we do, it's just marriage, it's time for this, like you said, versus a mutual. Oh, yeah. There's a difference. So when the quality, all these, I mean, be very frank, when a husband, I think, comes with those emotional connections, maybe a wife has more, I don't know. But what I'm saying is there's a difference, men and women, listeners, viewers, when we live in obedience, first and foremost to the covenant of intimacy just within the confines of marriage in all regards, but then with the mindset and actions of desiring to please the other person, whatever that may look like. I think that there are rewards there that nothing outside of the marriage covenant compares to. Nothing. No, it's good. There's some mystery there. The mystery of oneness. I want to put this out there. Pastor Brandon got 21 minutes. Okay. Whoa. Pastor Brandon sent us this. I haven't read this. We actually had a member of our church family recommend this resource. I haven't got to it yet. But Pastor Brandon sent us this image and said that chapter 1 of this book hits on the holistic sex topic. The book is called The Great Sex Rescue. It's by, the author is Sheila Ray. Ray is spelled W-R-A-Y. And then the last name is Gregory. Maybe Haley could drop an Amazon link. Yeah, so Gregoire. Gregoire. I don't know, maybe it's French. I don't know. I've never met Sheila, however you pronounce her last name. But Pastor Brandon said that this is good content. He's a few chapters into this book. And he gives it a stamp of recommendation, so I wanted to pass that on. Again, haven't read it personally. I don't know if you have. Have not. But, okay. No, I have not. I'm reading Timothy Keller's book right now, The Meaning of Marriage, which is
really good. Really, really, really good.
I'm doing Marcus Warner and Chris Corsi's 4 Habits for a Joy-Filled Marriage. So,
cool. Cool. Well, let's shift our conversation, Josh, to that second element. And obviously, we talked the most in this podcast about the marriage side of things because it's our context. It's what we know. Married. We don't want to talk as much about we will talk about the next 2 things, but probably not in the same level. So holiness and singleness. Talk a little bit about that. What does the Bible say about singleness?
Well, I mean, again, you go to 1 Corinthians 7 and Paul says, man, I wish that you were as I am. And in singleness, he says you have this undivided focus. You can have this undivided focus.
Good.
I mean, that's kind of what
there's potential there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's interesting. I had somebody ask me, after this message, like, well, do people who are single have greater kingdom impact? And maybe you have a different answer. I said, I think they have different kingdom impact. Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as quantifiably, they have X times the impact. I don't know.
They have greater capacity is what the Bible says.
There are a lot of variables to that.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a single person and I spend all my time sitting in mom and dad's basement playing Call of Duty, I'm not living into a whole lot of, there's not a lot of kingdom impact there probably.
But you have a greater capacity as a single person. That's what Paul's saying. You have a capacity for doing more for God's kingdom than a married person. You do.
Yeah. Well, because you don't have that divided focus built in.
It's literally just time.
I mean, the reality is, I being a married guy, I have a responsibility to my wife.
A lot of responsibilities.
Being a dad, I have a responsibility to my children.
Exactly.
I like the way that Pastor Sam Albury says it. He says marriage. It's not that marriage is more difficult than singleness, but it is more complicated. Mm-hmm. And kind of the example that came up in this conversation that I had is like, hey, if you're single, like, let's say there's some, natural disaster. Tornado rips through, Alabama, and you just feel, I got to go down there and do something. You can, as long as you have clearance from your back, you just go. You just go to Alabama.
A lot more complicated with kids.
I can't do that.
No.
I can't just be like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to jump on the next flight down to Alabama and help out with some tornado relief.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. But
it doesn't mean that the single person always chooses to do those things. So
no, but it's also, again, and this is where I think the church has done them a disservice. Is like, and I referenced this. I don't remember if I referenced it in second service, but in first service, right? It's like, you're single. You've got all kinds of free time.
Right.
Well, hey, you can babysit. Oh, you can run this event at the church.
Yeah. Because all good things,
but I think it's important. It's as important for somebody who's single as is somebody who's married or dating to ask those questions. What is my purpose? Mm-hmm. What is my kingdom purpose and calling in this season of life? Mm-hmm. And am I living into that?
Don't assume.
Don't assume, because their purpose and calling might not have anything to do with babysitting your children. Mm-hmm. For them, they have to wrestle with whether or not they're obedient to what they are called to. Mm-hmm. But everyone around them has to be mindful that we don't just kind of plop all these things onto them, which at the end of the day ultimately is a lot of times about what's convenient for us. Oh, hey, you've got spare time.
You're breathing right now. You're alive.
That's right. You can watch my children.
Yeah.
So that I can go and do something different. So we have to be mindful of those things. But there is like you said, there is that capacity.
Greater.
So for those that are single, again, what is your focus? Do you have that laser focused kingdom vision to where you're chasing after that God-given purpose and calling in your life? And really evaluate that. I think is going to be an important thing.
Shameless plug, for those watching who are single, listeners and viewers, if you haven't been through Discover Purpose at Radiant Life, that is a great program to go through to discover your purpose and maybe begin to seize and utilize that kingdom capacity that you have in a greater way until the day that, if and when the Lord brings a significant person into your life that you would covenant with. Check out Discover Purpose, and then also Live Sent. These are two ways that you can kind of find out. It's like, how can I maximize my kingdom capacity during this season of singleness.
And maybe for some, like it's a season that's going to be the rest of their life.
Yes.
And that's okay.
It is.
And that's okay.
Well, and Paul, there's a scripture that it intimates that there is a gifting of singleness, that there is something that the Lord imparts to certain people to be able to live in that maximum kingdom capacity in this existence. And that's not always.
Well, and there's some debate on that.
I know.
The
interpretation.
In 1 Corinthians 7, the word, when Paul says that some have this gift, some have that gift, and he's talking about singleness and staying as he is, which is single. That Greek word is charisma, which is the same word that you see show up in 1 Corinthians 12 when he's talking about spiritual gifts.
Grace.
So, I mean, is lifelong singleness and celibacy a spiritual gift? There's not universal.
It's a charisma.
There's not universal, agreement on that.
Yeah.
But that's where, again, Sam Albury would say, well, they're both a gift. Like marriage is a gift, and I would affirm that. Marriage, like,
is.
Hey, it is. But singleness is also a gift. And don't be so quick to get rid of the gift that you've been given. So
you had a couple things about singleness where what was the mutual submission portrait in singleness. And you talked about, experiencing life in community. Talk a little bit about that. When you're single, there can be this, maybe this hermit sort of retreating from community feeling as a single person, but God's plan really is that you are having a communal impact. And I will say, Josh, I'm going to call you out, you and your wife. I was aware that Rasika Stewart, who is our office manager and our youth director, is married to a wonderful man, Chance Stewart.
Chancey.
Yep. And, but she wasn't always. In fact, she was single for a lot of time, but Rasika every once in a while would tell me, that there was this weekly sort of appointment at your house where she came to your house, a married couple's house with a bunch of kids, and she had dinner with you guys.
Oh, we just hung out. My kids will still, she's Aunt Sika.
Yeah. But I mean, what I gathered from that, watching that happen, was here was a young family, young kids who are including a single gal in their family dynamic, in their community, in a way that spoke to her that, hey, just because you're single, because there's not another person to be, the four that we need for euchre, doesn't mean we don't love you and that we don't want you to break bread at our table. And I went away it was impacting. It was pretty cool. So,
well, and again, like I think we always do well to have a variety of perspectives at the table. I referenced that in one of the services. Like my favorite life group really was one where we had, again, multiple generations, but not, we had some married, we had some single, we had, some with kids, some empty nesters. You had,
yes.
And that was so awesome because you get a variety of perspectives. You learn to appreciate, some of these differences. It's not a little echo chamber where, oh yeah, we're all like this. Well, let's assume everybody else is probably like this and wants the things that we want and whatnot. So, but
sprinkle in some diversity there, and it's even better.
Yes, right. Yeah, we get so, I don't know.
We're pale.
We grab. Well, no, we grab. Birds of a feather flock together. That cuts across the variety of different, demographic markers. We tend to hang out with people who are like us,
vote like us,
and we should stop just doing that. We should invite some other voices to the table.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, life and community. That's really important.
Yeah. Shifting gears, Josh, as we kind of come to the close the next few minutes here. The third area that you addressed was holiness in dating. And you started by talking about a Christian sexual ethic. So talk more about that in relationship to dating.
Well, because this has gotten so messy, and I'd say that our culture is hypersexualized. I think all culture everywhere has always been hypersexualized.
But it really boomed in the 60s.
But you've got like the sexual revolution, which they've done some studies, if I'm not mistaken, that have basically shown that that's done nothing but harm. People's
nothing
like
but harm.
Emotional and
nothing
relational and sexual health.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It surprise, surprise. Violating God's way didn't pan out real well for humanity.
But the Christian sexual ethic is
right. I mean, if you're not married to a person of the opposite sex, sex is not an option
in any form.
In any form, like I mean, this is that's what that line, just like a Christian or biblical view of singleness and dating assumes celibacy.
Yes,
right? That there's sex isn't a feature, and it's gotten so messy, dude. I didn't even bother to look it up, but like you listen to some of the younger generation talk, and it's like, wow, things have gotten complicated. Like you've got, we're dating, no, we're just hanging out, no, it's
hookup culture.
I've heard floated the term situationship. I don't even know. I mean, I'm
You're
pretty
learning
sure,
me stuff I've never heard that before.
I'm pretty sure it means like they're having sex, but I don't know what it. Okay. But I'm like, what is this even? Like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's gotten really complicated.
Yeah.
To where like, I mean, you might not even be dating somebody, and you're having sex.
It's just hook up.
It's like there's zero commitment. This is just a means for sexual gratification.
Right.
And it's like, man, we've got to. If we want to follow Jesus. We do have to take this seriously. Again, there are dangers, and we saw that play out with the purity culture. Again, to where you take a good thing, it's like the bronze snake, right? Here's something that was a symbol of hope and healing, and they're like, no, you know what? Let's worship that thing. No,
right?
No.
Icons are not meant to be worshipped. They're meant to be venerated, but not worshipped.
So I think in some ways you saw that with the purity culture, again, an idolization of virginity, which created this like, oh well, if you are this, you're better or more spiritual or whatever than somebody who isn't. It's like,
Josh, I feel like we could do an entire podcast. I mean, you and I grew up in the Focus on the Family purity culture movement. I think we could do an entire podcast talking about it. But one of the big things I know for Lisa and I that we went away from purity culture saying was, and it came from one gentleman who now is completely deconstructed, does not follow Christ at all. Josh Harris
left his wife.
I mean, like this is the I kiss dating goodbye guy, right? And so we grew up in that culture, like, oh, you don't date, you court someone. Like you only have a romantic involvement with someone of the opposite sex that you would consider marrying. And my wife and I, we were like, that's dumb. We don't believe that. That's not true. That's not what we're going to encourage our kids to do. We want to encourage our kids to be wise in the relationships that they have with people of the opposite sex. But just because you go out to some movies and you hold hands and whatever, you text each other,
doesn't mean that you should get married.
Well, and it doesn't mean that that's the person that God has picked for you and identified to be as your spouse. And so my wife and I have said, dating is good. You should date within some very specific parameters.
And that's a key thing, right?
Yes.
Because the try it before you buy it kind of sex approach is not healthy.
Yeah.
Right. Like to where, are we running out of time?
We got like 7 minutes.
Okay.
We're good. We're doing good. But I think the holiness, in dating is really important, Josh, because, you said assumes celibacy, but you kind of went down another road. And I'll speak into this as a dad of teenagers as well. But you talked about how to biblically date. You really kind of framed a portrait for us on what it means to biblically date. Explain to listeners and viewers that may not have heard the message. How did you present that to the church?
I'm trying to remember what I said. How did I present that to the church?
You said first, assuming celibacy.
Yes.
Second key was about the two parties involved in the dating.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, we talked about not being unequally yoked.
That's church words.
When Paul talks about this, again, important to understand context.
Yes.
He was not writing that specific to the context of marriage.
No, it was an agrarian culture.
This is a biblical principle.
Yeah.
That I think we can stay true to the meaning of Scripture and apply this to dating relationships. I don't know that we can apply it to marriage for people that are already married.
No.
And I hit on that because Paul addresses
the covenant's
that.
there.
And he says, hey, if you're married and the other person's not a believer, and as long as they're willing to stay, you stay in that situation.
Because you don't know if your quiet spirit could win this person to Christ.
Yes. Yeah. So it's... Yeah, we
whole other conversation.
Yeah. So we apply this.
But what does it mean to be yoked? That's church stuff.
Again, so this is like a
boy and a girl who want to date.
A farm imagery, right? This is literally that wooden apparatus to where like this goes around my neck and it goes around your neck.
Yeah,
and
look it up.
We're bonded.
Yeah,
like
if Josh goes out the office door, I'm going with him.
Right, or
I can't not.
Or you're going to resist. And now it's going to be really hard for me to go a direction that I
could be injured.
Want or need to go.
Yeah.
And the language that he uses is unequally yoked. And I would suggest, and there are some scholars that would agree, right, that this is a reference back to Deuteronomy, where Moses says, don't plow with an oxen and a donkey yoked together. There's an imbalance. Again, I'm not a farmer.
But these creatures are significantly different in size and power, what they're used for. They're just different. You ever tried to lead a donkey someplace? They do what they want.
That's right.
They do what they want.
And now if I'm an ox,
yeah,
and I've got a stubborn donkey next to me, right? Like, and I'm trying to go where I'm supposed to go, and they're digging their heels in. I'm potentially gonna kill the donkey.
And here's where I'll speak, as a parent of teenagers who are have significant people in their lives. This is what my wife and we prayed it this morning. We prayed it this morning. We prayed over our kids, and we've got two goals for our kids. All of our kids, as they're pursuing significant other people, the first and most important thing is that the person that they are dating is a person who is pursuing Jesus. These people are not believing in God. They're not church attenders. They don't just go to youth group, but they're pursuing Jesus. These are people who love Jesus and are living lives of pursuit. That's number one for us. Secondly, for our family, and this maybe is different. I doubt it is, but I cannot abide laziness. And my wife can't really either. My kids can't either. So we want, whatever the career paths these different people take, we want to see a work ethic that's a hard worker, because you could succeed in anything in this world if you just apply yourself and you're a hard worker. So those are our two things. What about you, Josh? We're running.
Are we running out of time?
We got 3 minutes.
Okay,
keep talking.
So we talked about not being unequally yoked.
Yep.
Right? We talked about
cannot work
because it won't work.
It can't.
It won't work. So. And again, we've talked before about missionary dating. Terrible idea.
The ox is not going to convert the donkey
into an ox.
To an ox. The donkey will damage the ox and lead it astray. The Proverbs are full of scriptures. Dating someone who is below your spiritual maturity is a mistake. This is a mistake.
Well, and we've addressed this in other episodes of the podcast. Some of that is because, let's say I've got a person who's not following Jesus. They're not adhering to the law of Jesus. Right. So they're going to probably be okay with things that, as a follower of Jesus, are off limits. But these things that they're okay with appeal to the flesh and the sin
the things
nature
that you truly want to do.
Right. And it's like, oh, okay. It can be much easier to self-justify and to go that route. So do not be unequally yoked. And so for some people, that means, honestly, like you need to break off whatever relationship you're in. Right. If this person is pulling you away from Jesus, why would you stay in this? And again, that's probably a gross oversimplification. I don't know. There's emotional connection. There's all these different things. But But that's where we have to ask that question: is Jesus king in my life?
Yeah.
And if he is,
can I trust him to bring the right person? Can I trust him to bring the right man or woman into my life that loves Jesus the way that I do? Right? Girls, is this a person that I can trust to lead? Right? That I can biblically submit to? Men, is this a woman that I can love as Christ loved the church? Like, start thinking about those things. Ultimately, what we said was put God first. That was it. Well, this has been episode 69 of Radiant Reflections. So thankful that you joined us. Want to encourage everybody, like, subscribe, share this podcast. I'd like to see some comments on this one particularly, because we said a bunch of stuff about stuff. Well, some of it we know about, some of it we don't. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week, right after Holy Week and Easter, Resurrection Sunday, for episode 70 of Radiant Reflections.